A lack of advertising revenue puts Digital Broadcasting Corporation out of business. Japan's emperor hints at giving up the throne due to weakening health. And a recap of a record-setting day at the Olympics. Good evening. Digital Broadcasting Corporation announced today it's returning its operating license to the government and closing down because of difficult advertising conditions. More than 110 staff will lose their jobs when their contracts are terminated next month. Anne-Marie Sim has more.
The city's biggest digital broadcaster says it's going off air after a 5-year run because the development of Hong Kong's digital broadcasting industry was unsatisfactory and it had been unable to gain enough advertising support.
Because there's a lack of critical mass of our audience, so that we came to the conclusion that there's no prospect for this kind of business model. It's totally not commercially viable.
The firm also pointed out that its broadcasts could not be received universally in cars.
We are still facing a lot of difficulties, especially for the distribution and the reception, especially in car radio.
DBC Radio will continue broadcasting until the government allows it to stop. More than 110 staff are being laid off and will have their contracts terminated on September 7th.
I feel sad and surprised. I think every people will feel sad because we really love the company. I think I have to calm down and then plan my future. Yeah, but I won't give up my dream.
Staff are being notified of compensation arrangements, including severance pay and paid leave individually. The Commerce and Economic Development Bureau confirmed it had received DBC's application to surrender its licence this morning, and the Executive Council would make a decision soon. DBC is the second digital broadcaster to give up its licence after Phoenix U Radio. Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development Gregory So expressed regret that DBC was giving up its licence, but understood it was a business decision. Anne-Marie Sim, TVB News.
Burglars broke into New World Development founder Chung Yu-tung's mansion in Repulse Bay. They took some valuables, but no one was hurt. As Evelina Lung reports, no one has been arrested so far.
Jiang's home is on Repulse Bay Road. Police say they received a report at around 6 this morning about a burglary at the house. Jiang's son arrived at the house afterwards. Henry Jiang said the people in the house were not aware of the crime at the time, as they were inside their bedrooms. He said the burglars couldn't get into the locked rooms, and there were only minor losses. The burglars, according to Jiang, took away only some gold pieces from the corridor. Authorities say a lock on the balcony was broken. Sources also pointed out that the thieves passed by the property's swimming pool before breaking into the house. Meanwhile, at around 3 a.m., a burglar broke into an apartment in another building on Repulse Bay Road. A fight broke out between the thief and the tenant of the apartment. Both men suffered injuries. A suspect was subdued and was handed over to the police. Both the tenant and the suspect were sent to hospital for treatment. Evelina Lang, TVB News.
Secretary for Justice Rimsky-Yoon said today the government has no plans to ask Beijing for an interpretation of the Basic Law. He was responding to the legal controversy over the Electoral Affairs Commission's decision to bar some independence advocates from running in next month's Legislative Council elections. Anne-Marie Sim reports.
When independence advocate Edward Leung of Hong Kong Indigenous was disqualified last week by a returning officer from running in upcoming LegCo elections, it caused a firestorm of controversy. Leung has now threatened to submit an election petition to challenge the legality of the Electoral Affairs Commission's decision. Speaking to reporters at the airport before leaving for Australia this morning, Secretary for Justice Rimsky-Yun made it clear that the government would not be seeking an interpretation of the Basic Law from the National People's Congress Standing Committee. He said the issue could be handled by Hong Kong's legal system. Yun said he understands certain members of the public may disagree with some of the returning officers' decisions, but the officers have the legal power and responsibility to decide if a candidate is qualified for nomination. He stressed that simply signing your name on a nomination form does not automatically qualify you as an election candidate. The Justice Chief added that the returning officers have to consider a candidate's platform as a whole, rather than focusing on specific words they may have said, before deciding if they back Hong Kong independence. Mentioning independence doesn't necessarily mean they support it, he said. Yun added that even if a pro-independence candidate was elected, he or she would have issues taking up a seat in the legislature, as lawmakers are required to pledge allegiance to Hong Kong and swear they will uphold the Basic Law. Anne-Marie Sim, TVB News.
In a rare video address to the public, the Emperor of Japan expressed his desire to step down and hinted at turning over his throne to his son.
Always striving for perfection, Emperor Akihito expressed deep concern that at 82 years old, he's finding it difficult to fulfill his constitutional role as Japan's symbol of state.
Some years ago, I underwent 2 surgeries, and I began to feel physical weakness due to my age.
His Majesty goes on to suggest that merely limiting his role would be like cheating the people.
I believe it will not be possible for the Emperor to limit to the minimum his constitutional functions and duties as the symbol of national unity as his age advances.
Because abdicating could be interpreted as interfering in politics, the monarch didn't outright say he'd like to hand over the throne to his 56-year-old son, Crown Prince Naruhito. But he did make his strongest argument for why he should be allowed to abdicate.
In case the Emperor is affected by health impairment, and if his condition should reach a serious state, as we have seen in the past, there is concern that the society will stagnate and people's lives will be impacted in various ways.
The emperor closed his address by explaining his main goal is to ensure the imperial household is always regarded with the highest respect. Japan's prime minister said he understood the message loud and clear. Shinzo Abe vowed to work with the government on how they could help the emperor, but the idea has sparked opposition from Abe's conservative base. It worries that debate on the imperial family's future could widen the topic of letting women inherit and pass on the throne. The vast majority of Japanese sympathize with the emperor's desire to retire, but doing so would require legal changes.
Former Philippine President Fidel Ramos, who has been appointed as a special envoy to China, said his upcoming talks in Beijing would be aimed at easing tensions. Ramos was speaking ahead of a visit to China, which comes amid ongoing territorial disputes in the South China Sea.
Eventually, there will be formal bilateral talks. And the objective is the same objective as me, which is to bring about a condition of peace, sustainable development, and harmony in our Asia-Pacific region.
Thailand's ruling military government says the vote to approve the new constitution means elections can take place as early as next year. But critics say the new charter has made it easier for the military to keep its fingers on the pulse of power. Tony Sabine reports.
The people of Thailand woke up today to a new constitution, which will pave the way to general elections next year and a return to civilian rule. Today, a senior member of Thailand's ruling military junta said a democratically elected civilian government would be able to take power by December 2017. Thais handed the junta of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha a convincing win in yesterday's referendum on a new military-backed constitution. Preliminary results show more than 61% voted in favour. Full results are due on Wednesday. Analysts say a desire to see greater political stability drove the yes vote to victory. Still, they also pointed out that Thailand's military rulers ensured the yes campaign had the best conditions possible to secure victory.
Well, I think there are a number of factors that were working in favor of a yes vote. The first and probably most important was the number of restrictions that the military government put on campaigning for or against the draft constitution. And of course, those restrictions were applied most heavily to those campaigning for a no vote. Another factor I think is important is that a lot of voters were probably voting not so much for the content of the draft constitution, but instead for a return to normal politics.
Thailand has been rocked by more than a decade of political turmoil, which has resulted in 2 military takeovers and several rounds of often deadly street protests. Prior to the referendum, Thailand's major political parties had criticised the draft constitution, saying it would restrict democracy, including one provision calling for an appointed Senate with seats reserved for military commanders. Tony Sabine, TVB News.
Mudslides triggered by intense rainfall in Mexico has killed 40 people in the wake of Tropical Storm Earl. K-9 units are searching for several people still missing in Puebla State. Damage showed massive mudslides bearing entire hillsides, fallen trees, and buildings completely gutted. Catastrophe also hit the neighboring state of Veracruz, where mudslides and flooding have killed 10 people. Meantime, Mexico's Baja California Peninsula is bracing for yet another major storm. This as Tropical Storm Javier is forecast to become a hurricane. And back locally, the government has agreed to stick to a tight deadline in informing local pork traders of test results for imported pigs. This after a meeting between representatives of the pork trade and government officials today. Adam Shu reports.
In a recent food safety scare, live pigs imported from the mainland were found to carry banned chemicals but managed to make their way to the market.